What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Everything is a Spring. Derek, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Jim. I'm doing pretty good. Episode 20. We did it.
We did it. We are past the point where most podcasts stop.
Right. Yeah, we actually got to the point of no return. Not officially our 1 year, but pretty freaking close. So
yeah, when did we start recording these?
I think October last year.
Because we met at the Vortex in Atlanta for, I was in town for something, and you...
They were just hanging out. There was something you were there.
Out?
I think it was either family or you had a trip. I can't remember. Was it your sister had a wedding or parts of a wedding? I can't remember. This whole 4 years has been such a blur. I can't tell you what happened since high school.
Yeah, no, life has been crazy. I don't know if it's always been crazy or if it's just because we're now adults.
I think we're looking at the world differently, right? Like where before it was just, the world's your oyster. There's so much opportunity. Like you can do anything. We're not bound by, but like the realism starts to kick in, responsibilities kick in. And the worst part for me personally is time, man. Like I don't care that I'm getting older. It's just none of my friends have time to do stuff anymore,
Yeah.
But I think there'll be moments for that. I just got to appreciate them more than I used to, right?
This is actually something that's really interested me about church, right? And it just the instant community that religion provides and kind of the set aside time that kind of comes with it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Like that's one thing that they don't really tell you if you go to college, like not that everyone went, but if you do go to college, that's like the highest concentration of other adults that might have similar interests to you that you're going to get. So now, as an adult, like past college into grad school or whatever, into the workforce, you're having to get recreational things like clubs, play a sports club at your local park, to get that same level of community. And even then, you're talking small groups. But I think it's good. I think all things considered, looking back, I did pretty well. Like all of the folks that I wanted to keep in my life, for the most part, are around still to this day.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks can't say that. Like, even though we've all moved sometimes different parts of the state, some of my friends are different countries, serving their country in other places. And we still get to hang out. And I really got to give credit to Discord where it's due. I have been using Discord for about 11 years now. And I genuinely would not be able to talk to or play games with most of my friends without it. So I hope they don't get bought out because it's just such a great program. We do the podcast through it. And it works great. It's been one of those programs I use every day,
Everything's a Spring, sponsored by Discord?
Discord, I swear I will sell out right now. If you just send me an email, I'll sell out for Discord. I think my rule, right? If we ever do get sponsorships, I only want to get sponsorships for stuff we actually want. Right?
Yeah.
We're not hurting for money.
This is not about the money. And honestly, I don't want to be up here being MeUndies, whatever.
If I use it, that's one thing. Like, for example, if Reaper, the audio software that we use, was just like, you know what, we want to do some sponsorships, I would speak Reaper's praises.
100%.
It's the
100%.
one program I know. You can pay them $60 one time.
And it's yours forever. And
you get all the updates. There's no you got to buy the new update. There's no subscription. I would love to use Adobe Auditions or whatever, but I'm not paying $120 a month plus for some crap and as soon as you upgrade it, this is the crazy part. If you have old projects and you have a new version of Adobe Auditions, you have to translate it into the new version, and then it will never work again on the old software. Which is just, it's so restrictive. And this audio, not even audio, all things, subscription-based, marketing we have for everything. We're back at cable, if you think about it. People were bitching about cable forever. Oh, I got to pay $60, $80 a month for all these cable packages, half of them I never use. And streaming was supposed to be the cure. Oh, I only want Netflix. I just buy Netflix for that month or whatever. And now they're like, oh, we got Disney bundle. It's like, bro, that's cable. You're just making cable for a generation that never had to buy it themselves.
Everything that is new under the sun is old.
Would you say that everything's a spring and it all comes back?
It all does. I think this is actually really interesting because you do see these kinds of trends in business where you kind of have, the industry figures out the system, whether it's records or CDs or whatever, technology advances, the system breaks, something comes in and just completely changes the paradigm, like Napster or Netflix or Steam for video games. And then, now we're back to the point where, the industry has figured out how to make it profitable again and how to maximize their profits and how to squeeze as much money as they can out of the consumers, because that's what they're designed to do.
Yep. And you know what's crazy? I learned something like a couple weeks ago that shocked me, right? I've used Steam, and anyone who's not a gamer, Steam's like one of the biggest online libraries of games. It's like a support service, program on your computer. You launch games through it, right?
Yep.
And I thought my whole life, I was like, if I end up having kids one day or something, or even just someone I like enough to say, hey, I want to pass on my hundreds of games, thousands of games to you. Apparently that's not a thing. Your Steam account dies with you according to the terms of service. You can't like shunt all that money onto someone else's account, which kind of sucks. I'd rather have a freaking DVD.
I feel like that is a fair point. Like I do, like the convenience of Steam is phenomenal, right? But cause like I don't want to really have to go to, and this is like the catch-22, right? It's like, I really don't want to have to go to GameStop and like buy, Dishonored 2 or whatever.
True. But here's the thing, right? Even so, I'd like the option.
That's true.
Like at least if I pull out my old PS3 and I pull out Dishonored 2 and I connect to the internet, it will update. If I have a PlayStation Network account, I can still play that game, even though I haven't touched that console in years. My Steam account, someone takes the password or they decide to just permaban it because it's got some bot activity on it. How many hundreds of dollars have you lost over all of these years of collecting games? Yeah. Like, old man shakes fist angrily at Sky at service-based or subscription-based services.
Yeah, no. And it's funny because the CAD 3D modeling industry is actually very similar. It has become very similar. It used to be that almost every 3D modeling service that you looked at, Autodesk Inventor, SolidWorks, AutoCAD, you would basically buy the license, and then that was yours,
That's
basically forever, right?
Yep.
And the industry has very much moved away from that model to where you can't even act. You can. So the only one that I'm aware of, the big name 3D modeling softwares, and there are others. There's like a Libre and like FreeCAD and something like
this. Dude, shout out to my homie FreeCAD for always being free. That's what I learned.
Yeah, and there's definitely a place for those, but if you're looking at like really professional level 3D modeling, it's really hard to beat the name brand. Like SolidWorks is the industry standard for a reason, and it's because it's freaking good.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a professional, right? Like if you were like you're an engineer, you have a company that works in engineering often, right?
Yeah.
It would benefit a company to pay like $1,200 one time if you're going to be using that software for 5, 6, 8 years. Right. But the reality is from my experience, I use Autodesk, Fusion 360 because it's free. Like everything that I have to do can be done in FreeCAD. I'm not building an airplane engine, but the software has enough features where you can get anything you need done in it. If you're trying to work collaboratively, like in SolidWorks, every person that wants to work has to have an account.
Yes.
And they're starting to do the Netflix thing, aren't they? Where it's like, oh, if you have an account that's like, or a software that's like 3 subscriptions, it has to be like geolocated. Like they're adding that crap.
I'm not sure about whether or not Inventor is doing that or Autodesk is doing that, because Fusion and Inventor are both Autodesk products. But I know that is something that is happening, and that is a trend in the industry, in the software industry as general. But nowadays, you can't even... The only person, really, who's selling permanent licenses at this point is SolidWorks, and you have to buy it with a 2-year subscription and like a training package and all this. So by the time you're actually out the door for a permanent license, you're still hooked for 2 years, and it's like almost $10,000.
Sheesh.
Yeah,
for $10,000 for one seat. And you
seat.
have to buy all this crap you don't want. And I bet you, I don't know if you've had this experience, but my power went out for a while. I had to actually Karen at Georgia Power. Unfortunately, I hate to do it, but my grandfather got affected by it. Our neighborhood's power went back on within about 12 hours. Ours was out for days. And I had to beg these folks to do their job. Long and short of it, I learned the hard way. After our power came back on, our internet was still out. So I was like, great, now I got to call AT&T, whatever. And sure enough, I learned Steam and many other gaming softwares. You can have the game downloaded. It can be a single player game. If you don't have internet, you can't go into offline mode, which
absolutely
is the
ridiculous.
Dumbest thing ever. So like, I have a Steam Deck, the little handheld Linux-based gaming console Steam put out. And I couldn't play half my games, even though they were fully installed, because I didn't click offline mode before my internet went out. And I think that's just a huge miss, because the whole point of having a handheld, like if I think of an old school Nintendo DS, if the thing has power, it's going to let me play something if I have the chip that has the game on it.
Have you seen, and I've thought about this because I don't know if it's just that I'm sick and tired of the corporate bullshit like that, but I'm very much like of the opinion that I'm just going to use old things, because there's so many games for example, the Nintendo DS that I have not played and will never play or ever have time to play.
Right.
So it's kind of like, why not just stick with that? But have you seen where people are starting to like remake these old like games consoles and stuff? Like people make a modern version of like the Game Boy Color or whatever.
I've seen that like on Reddit and stuff. It's crazy how interesting the handheld revolution has become. I'm seeing companies like, Temu, the like Chinese trash, like you can just buy crap for cheap. They have like little switches, like a Nintendo Switch Lite is like $100, and it's just a little device that runs Linux and emulates a Nintendo Switch, which is hilarious how it kind of comes all the way back around. Because I personally believe if I've bought your game once, at any point in my life, I should be able to emulate it if I'm not selling it. Like, Nintendo be damned. I don't feel like just because I don't... Like, for example, I had Nintendogs back in the day. You remember the game Nintendogs? It was like Tamagotchi for Nintendos.
Yeah.
I should be able to download a ROM for that off of insert website here so I don't get banned. And then, emulate that ROM on a Linux console or on my Windows, like Dolphin emulator. I shouldn't be punished as the consumer. They're coming after consumers for emulating their products, when the reality is most of us have bought these games before. We're only buying them because you don't support them anymore. If I want to play Need for Speed Underground 2 on PlayStation 2, it's going to be a hard sell for me to find a PlayStation 2, get it to run, and then also all of the extra, like memory cards, stuff like that. I have a high-end gaming PC that we are recording a podcast, 300 miles away from each other already. Let me use that hardware. It works. If I can play Flight Simulator on the damn thing, I should be able to play Nintendogs. It's that simple.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just a proponent of piracy, honestly.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Give me that, looty, give me the booty, put the eye patch on. I don't give a fuck. At the end of the day, they're going to come after me for my guns. They're going to come after me for my software. So I'm just accepting the idea. Just do what you want in silence and enjoy your life. Because if the government and these companies have anything to say about it, they will take it all away from you. It sucks. Sure. It sucks. But that's the reality we're living in. Everything's politicized, even games, I
was reading an article, and I don't remember. Have you heard of, the life corporations?
No. What's that?
I don't know if that's the right term, but it's basically, it's like the corporations that own the food supply. But they own, all the farms, right? They own all the farms. They own all, the water infrastructure. They own the power grid. These types of companies that are really, really big, like Textron, BlackRock.
You're talking about the super companies. Conglomerates.
Like the food companies, all the food and the groceries. Nestle, all the food in the grocery store is owned by 5 companies.
Yeah, I've read about that. If you look at sodas, they're all different brands to have some natural competition, but it's 2 companies, 2 overarching companies.
Yeah,
it's interesting how we have anti-monopoly laws. For example, is it fair to say in Georgia, AT&T is a pretty stark monopoly, the Southern Company? Southern Bell, I guess, is what it used to be called.
I guess it was just the Bell Company, but I'm not sure. I don't know, right? Because I actually have Comcast, I think, as my carrier. Right?
Okay, but you are a little bit out of the city, so they have 2 options. It's either Comcast, Spectrum, or AT&T. And if I'm not mistaken, Spectrum is like sublet of one of the two.
Maybe. I know that they all piggyback off of each other's infrastructure just because like infrastructure is expensive.
For sure. So at the end of the day, like you're using the same, if you're using fiber optic internet, you're using the same fiber optic.
That's right.
Right? Like I can't prove it. I bet the like AT&T fiber and the Google fiber, I bet it goes into the same relay at the end of the day.
I'm sure they at least share some infrastructure. Again, just because it's expensive. Right. So I guess like at the end of the day, it's like whoever actually owns, that's the thing, right? It's like whoever actually owns the physical stuff, right? Like is really ultimately in charge. Right?
True. And this is clear in our power grid. But we've been having rolling outages all across the United States, from California with those wildfires, Texas because they don't know how weather works, and Georgia just because we ain't updated shit since we made the railroads. Like, it's interesting that our society relies so heavily on this technology, but we've done none of the investment, at least in this side of the West, to actually hardening it. An EMP could take out our power grid in a massive way. It wouldn't even take a foreign actor. It could just be an accident, as crazy as that sounds.
Well, so I remember a while ago there was a story. It was relatively close to me, actually. It was somewhere down here. Basically, some guy like shot up a transformer station.
Oh, yeah. That's a common occurrence in the recent years of domestic terrorism.
And it like shut down power to the city for like
I believe this
days.
was in Tennessee. It was an AT&T transformer in Tennessee, and it was like a relay station. This guy got some pot shots at and for all of our non-American viewers, this is going to sound nuts. One of the things that local power companies and like, I guess, EMCs are doing is armoring and hardening, or even putting like gravel, what do you call them? Like a gravel barrier, a berm around so that you can't get a shot at a transformer, which is a ridiculous problem to have.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense, though. Like,
it does.
You know?
No, it's just that's America. Like, you have to worry about citizens shooting at transformers because that is a viable way of committing domestic terrorism in this country.
Yeah. But like, I'm just saying, most transformers are protected by nothing more at this point. Like, pre this incident.
Right.
Nothing more than like a barbed wire fence.
Exactly.
That's it.
You could climb over it or cut through it.
You climb over it, you cut through it, you drive your truck through it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of like, maybe they should be a little bit more difficult to get to, you know?
No, I'm agreeing with you. I think it's a good idea to protect our infrastructure. I think, I hate to, I'm not even going to get political. We already did that this year. But one person in politics who will remain unnamed, the Department of Transportation head, I have a good feeling about him. Only because he actually tries to learn about the systems that he's been in charge for this presidency.
Your boy Pete.
Old Pete. I don't really know how I feel about him as a vice president or any of that crap. But as transportation secretary, he's done a pretty damn good job. We're actually breaking ground on our first, high-speed rail project. It's not going to happen in their presidency. But the fact that it's actually starting and they were able to get enough buy-in from both sides, it's something Americans want. Like, Americans want trains that work. I think local governments definitely want federal funds so that they can upgrade their, municipal transit systems. I can talk about MARTA all day. My family worked for MARTA, the Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. And let me say, as someone who's not related to MARTA directly, as in they don't pay me, it kind of sucks. Like, you go to somewhere like Boston or New York and you're like, okay, yeah, it's dirty, don't get me wrong, but it works. The trains come on time. I can't imagine looking at like a European equivalent.
Yeah. Well, also, like, MARTA has like 2 lines.
It's like north, south, east, west, and then some special stuff for like the airport.
Little spurs. Yeah. But like, if you're trying to get anywhere that's not on that cross, it's kind of useless.
You're cooked. Get on a bus, get an Uber. That's your best shot.
Yeah, but anyways, we digress. Speaking of mass transportation, Derek. Here we go. This is actually not about mass transportation, but it's sort of related. Today, I want to talk about another airship. Today, we're talking about the largest helium-filled rigid airship built by the U.S. Navy. We are talking about the USS Akron.
Akron. How do you spell that?
Akron.
Akron. All right. Story time.
She was put down in 1931 and built by the Goodyear Blimp Corporation. Or excuse me, Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation.
Oh, they pivoted from Zeppelin to Blimp over time.
They did.
Goodyear, talk about monopolies. that is a silent monopoly in our country that no one really thinks about. People think of Goodyear, they think of tires, right? They're one of the largest producers of rubber for the domestic United States. It's crazy. Or like importer of rubber too. Yeah, them and Michelin kind of got the market set up.
So, well, because isn't Michelin specifically tires?
They're specifically tires, but they also, I guess they dabble in restaurant review too.
I think that's a different Michelin.
It's the same Michelin, Jim.
Is it really?
A fun little sidebar. The reason the Michelin tire was trying to get folks to have an excuse to drive to other cities before driving was common, you know, driving what we would consider state to state or over there from different countries in Europe. The incentive was, let's make a little book with all these great restaurants. What's the criteria for these restaurants to get in our little book? It's got to be good, right? And slowly that evolved into the Michelin star. So you got a Michelin star if your restaurant was like hyper good, it was worth traveling to. It's the same Michelin tire company, Jim. It is.
That's wild.
You would never think. But I was like, I looked into this when one of my buddies got into, he's a cook and trying to be a chef. And I was like, he's told me Michelin is the same tire. It's the tire company. They just pivot it.
That is actually a phenomenal marketing strategy.
It's a huge marketing strategy. And to this day, the Michelin star is like the golden standard for, I guess, French cuisine. Because that's every freaking Michelin star restaurant's like French or Japanese, it seems.
That is amazing.
And it's like, to roast our friends in England, it's just like, yeah, we have all these Michelin star restaurants. What kind of food do they serve? It's French food. Narcs. No one wants your beans. They eat like they're still in World War II. You spent the world going around stealing people's spices and you refuse to use it. Wake up.
Wake up.
Put some paprika on that shit. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I ain't got no sense, Jim. Come on.
It's okay. It's okay. We've lost all of our British listeners, but that's fine.
All 2% of them. Damn.
So the USS Akron, as I said, was built by the Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation in Akron, Ohio. Actually, as it happens.
Okay.
And the USS Akron was a little bit special for being as far as Zeppelins go. It was still built with the duralumin alloy we talked about last episode when we were talking about the USS Shenandoah.
The good stuff.
But they changed the way that the girders were created, like the internal structure is very different. And what that does is it allows it to have a large internal volume that's unobstructed by trusses. Okay. And so, guess what they end up doing with this ship?
Are we adding triangles now? Is it triangle time?
We are adding a hell of triangles. They do love some triangles.
What I know about airships is from episode 19.
That's okay. That's fair. Okay, so so let me go ahead and kind of give you a little bit more details then. So the USS Akron originally was purposed to serve as a scouting ship. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because like Zeppelins are not very fast, right? But they can, because they rely on buoyancy as opposed to fuel to stay aloft, they can stay aloft for a very, very long amount of time. Yeah. So for like a loitering platform, I suppose, like scouting platform, they make a lot of sense. So that was the original idea, was basically for it to be a scouting platform. But what they ended up deciding is, the Zeppelin is great, but if you come down far enough to be able to actually see things, that puts you in range of guns.
Yeah, and you don't want to pop your balloon.
You never want to pop your balloons. So what they decided was, let's undermount 5 Sparrowhawk F-9C experimental fighters.
You mean to tell me this son of a bitch is an aircraft carrier?
America loves their aircraft carriers.
So time out. In the same time where we're building these first sea-driven aircraft carriers in the same generation in the 30s, we're dropping planes. We might be the Empire from Star Wars.
There's a skyhook that basically, so there's an internal bay. That's what they did with all this space inside the Zeppelin. And there's this internal bay and an elevator system that basically has the plane on a hook. And it pulls it up or lowers it out of the hangar doors, which is in the bottom of the Zeppelin. And then the planes can take off and return to the Zeppelin.
I gotta find some video. How does that thing land? Like, is it a strip or is it literally like you're catching a hook?
You're literally catching a hook on top of the plane.
That is insane.
It's pretty freaking cool. America, we love our boats and we love our aircraft carriers so much that we decided to put both in the sky.
That's wild. My buddy Jonah was telling me about this when we dropped episode 19. He was like, yeah, there's like aircraft carriers too. And I was like, you're crazy. That's ridiculous. And Jonah, you were right. So it's just a hook. So what is the pilot doing? Like, you lower your fighter aircraft down. It's a prop plane. I'm guessing you put that bad boy at like 60% power and they just release the hook and it falls. Pretty much.
And you got to remember too, like, these are early fighters.
They're not heavy.
They're not very heavy. Well, relative. Yeah, they're not very heavy. They weigh about 2,000 pounds, I believe.
Yeah, that's a car.
A piece. Which is, not very heavy at all. I mean, you can think about like the F-15 weighs like what, 60,000 pounds or something?
Yeah, ridiculous. Empty.
It's literally like a flying M1 Abrams tank.
Yep. I mean, that's pretty accurate. It can go to space.
It can, but I digress. But basically, like, these planes were actually designed also as like aircraft carrier ships, right? Because that makes them compact. That means they can take off and land in a very short, very, very short runway. So for a lot of reasons, these F-9Cs make a lot of sense as Zeppelin aircraft, like parasite fighters, basically, is what they're called. And so I believe that they are able to fly at very, very slow speeds, basically. In order to, again, land on these because early aircraft carriers were very, very small.
They were using ramps back then.
Exactly. Or not even, right? But the Zeppelin, I'm trying to find the max speed, because it could actually go fairly quick.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, in miles per hour and knots, ground speed. Like, it's not the fastest thing in the sky, of course. But it is the biggest thing in the sky that can move a steady clip. I'm guessing, like, 30 knots likely?
It could move at 80. Maximum speed is 84 miles an hour. Cruising speed is 50 miles an hour.
You're kidding me. That's actually a steady clip.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, for a lot of these older planes, I believe that's well within, like, the takeoff speed.
I would say, like, those old school, like, one-engine, radial engine fighters were I'm not an expert, probably like 60 to 80 knots takeoff speed, max. It's like what a Cessna takes off at like 80 as a modern equivalent.
So the maximum speed of the F-9C Sparrowhawk is 176 miles per hour. That doesn't really give us the takeoff speed, but that should give you an idea.
All you need for this is like maybe a couple tens of knots above its stall speed.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that's way scarier than landing on like a catapult-assisted aircraft carrier.
Oh, yeah. Like it literally has a hook that's mounted on top of it.
Because think about like the stakes.
Have to grab.
With aircraft carriers, when we're talking about ships, yeah, you miss that thing and you run out of fuel and you just absolutely can't get it, you ditch in the sea. So you're flying up to something. Oh, you missed it, going around, you're at zero, you're at bingo fuel, it's getting stressful. And then what if you miss and you simply can't climb again? Do you just glide down and put it in a field?
I guess. I mean, you do still have landing gear.
Yeah, I guess so. So you just have to do an emergency landing at the nearest friendly airfield.
If you can get to one.
Yeah,
because that's the whole idea about these is that these Sparrowhawks are designed to operate from the loitering aircraft carrier, in this case a Zeppelin, or the USS Akron. I guess it's not really a Zeppelin, it's a rigid airship, but whatever. Zeppelin, I guess, is just the German word for it.
Yeah, like, they called it the Goodyear Zeppelin Company. Like, they're okay.
Yeah. Zeppelin sounds cooler, too.
It does sound cool.
But yeah, so we're talking about the USS Akron, and construction began in October 1929 in Akron, Ohio at the Goodyear Air Dock. I wanted to talk about this because this is actually, the USS Akron was really, its destruction was very important in the downfall of the airship age, right? So we've heard this term, this man's name before, Rear Admiral William A. Moffett. His name comes up literally all the time in the development of these early airships, because he, as it turns out, is really the driving force behind airship development in the United States Navy. He's really the guy pushing it.
A visionary.
He's the visionary, right? And so as the USS Akron is kind of making its moves, and it actually has like a pretty decent amount of service record, because it's used for, and this is in, the, what's it called? The interwar period. Interbellum, I suppose, is what it's called, between World War I and II. I think it has
the peace times.
The peace times.
Where all that happened was the economy crashed.
Exactly. But yeah, so in the interbellum period, basically, obviously there's no actual warfare, but they're doing lots of training exercises. They're developing.
That's the time to bulk up,
Yeah, they're developing all these experimental technologies. And the Akron is, again, a helium, like the Shenandoah, helium-filled. But now they have like the safety valves in place. They also are actually now experimenting more with rubber. So the USS Shenandoah, we talked about this a little while in the last episode, uses gold beater skin to gas-proof the gas bags, right? And that's basically like the fine intestinal lining of an animal, famously also used in early condoms at the time. So at this point, just that shiver of disgust.
I just don't want to think about it.
That's fair. So
put the cow on your willy. That's what it feels like. No.
So Germany, France, and Britain are still using gold beater skin to gas-proof their gas bags. But the Akron now, because again, it's also being made by Goodyear, is using Goodyear tire and rubberized cotton, which is also, again, being used in the manufacture of automobile tires. Rubberized cotton is a lot heavier than gold beater skin, but it's way cheaper and it's a lot more durable because it's thicker, right? Like gold beater skin is very, 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 very thin, but rubberized cotton, you can make it as thick as you want.
Yeah, so you can have a little bit of like, tolerance. If something scrapes across it, it's not just going to pop. You might have a little bit of give, so to speak.
And they're also starting to experiment with latex, right? So basically, synthetic rubbers as well, right? Because synthetic rubbers nowadays are an extremely integral part of our day-to-day lives. You think about
nitrile, man.
Nitrile, and almost wherever you go, latex-based artificial rubbers are everywhere.
Oh yeah, in your car, down to like smaller electronics in some situations, for like insulation,
wearables, all kinds of things. So
the stretchy pants and Spanx.
Half of the gas cells use, rather than true like natural rubber, they are also using a gelatin latex rubber compound, which is more expensive than rubberized cotton, but lighter than gold beater skin. So it's an experimental, cutting-edge stuff. Yeah.
Does the new generation of, like, I guess the people younger than us, do they know that rubber comes from trees originally? Is that common knowledge?
I doubt it.
Because like they grew up in latex and nitrile. Like these are lab-made materials. It's not like, yes, it has some source material that comes from nature, but I haven't thought about a rubber tree my whole life. Not once.
I actually work with quite a number of high school students as part of the robotics team that I mentor. I will have to ask them where does rubber comes from. Where do you think rubber comes from?
These are future engineers. Do they know?
We will, and that's a fair point too, because my sample size might be skewed, or my sample population might be skewed. But we will return to that. I will ask my students about that and see what they come up with. There are 12 gas cells in the Akron and its sister ship, the Macon, USS Macon, and they are total volume of gas is 7,400,000 cubic feet.
Huge.
That yields a gross lift of 400,000 pounds, and the structure of the Zeppelin itself is almost 240,000 pounds.
Oh yeah, so, you got some airplane room now.
Oh yeah, they can lift 160,000 pounds.
I'm surprised we didn't deploy a smaller airship out of a bigger airship just to prove we can.
Just Russian nesting dolls, but airships.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the horsepowers a little bit. The Akron was powered by 8 Maybach VL2 560 horsepower gasoline engines.
Is this the same Maybach I'm thinking of?
What's the Maybach that you're
car company, I guess?
I mean, they make engines.
Holy cow.
That's what they do.
There are no new companies. That's crazy.
No, like everything, yeah. So Maybach is a German luxury car brand.
It is the same Maybach. Holy cow.
Yeah, they were bought out by Mercedes, but originally they were founded in 1909 by William Maybach.
Ain't that a bitch?
Yeah. It's all the same rich people. That's all it is.
Yeah, old money goes old.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is kind of like, it's wild. Like
crazy.
Basically, it's all the same companies that have been around since 1909 or whatever, the early industrial revolution. And then they've just eaten everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, I work for a company that loves absorbing. They can't get enough of absorbing smaller companies to the point where it's like, I take care of my pop. So sometimes I run into products that my company makes and it's just like, wow, I know that this is a insert company here product, but it's under its like maiden name, like the name it got captured under.
Oh no. It's under its captured name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Maybach made engines for a lot of things. And again, like it's a German engine company.
Don't
so
look into their history too much.
Yep. Be a little bit careful about that. So one of the things that the Akron kind of had to deal with when they were positioning its engines is they actually ended up. So most Zeppelins at the time had staggered engines, right? Right. So you have one propeller pushing air down the length of the hull, and then that runs in the front, and then you have another propeller in the rear. And if those propellers are spinning the same direction and are in line with each other, it'll create basically like a compounding turbulence effect. And that will cause a lot of vibration. So what they end up doing is they basically, rather than redesign the airship to stagger the propellers, they basically put in a gearbox to counter-rotate the one propeller either aft or forward. And that basically creates a counter vibration, right? Because everything is in waves. And that helps solve the vibration problem.
That's interesting. It's such a simple solution. Like, yeah. Rock the boat in different directions and the boat's not rocking.
This is also kind of neat because the propellers are able to swivel up or down to be vertical or horizontal, which means that you can push that thrust up, down, side to side, whatever.
Is this the first use of VTOL, like variable takeoff?
Kind of, yeah, it kind of is.
Even though they're not taking off with that force, but it's interesting. This is the first time I'm thinking about thrust vectoring.
Yeah. So this allows you to thrust vector for sure.
Airships are so cool.
Airships are super cool, and it's also interesting too because even though we don't use airships anymore today, a lot of this technology is still a lot of the lessons learned from this technology is still being applied to other areas of avionics.
Yeah, if you think about it, jet engine is just a propeller engine.
Yeah, you think about these Zeppelins with the propellers mounted on the side. It's just a drone with a balloon on it.
That's fair. And hey, don't give them any more ideas. We already shot down one balloon with a freaking F-22.
It's first best kill.
First kill, best kill.
Exactly. So the Akron also has a range of 6,000 miles.
Oh, that's wild.
It's wild. Yeah.
Do they run off of diesel?
Gasoline. A lot of the European airships run off of diesel, but we're in America. We love gasoline.
Gas.
We love some gas. So we use gasoline. But they also use the same water ballast system as the Shenandoah, where you're basically recapturing the water vapor from the engines to use as ballast so you can avoid releasing the very valuable and non-replenishable helium that is in your gas bags.
That's just that condenser system, that's just a great idea, whoever invented that on Shenandoah. Huge.
Really phenomenal. So it's good to see that it's used here too. And again, they have the air hangar trapeze system. And had the airship survived longer, it probably would have been upgraded with better aircraft because the Seahawks are really too heavy.
Sparrowhawk?
what did I say? The Skyhawks? What did I say they were?
I thought it was you said Sparrowhawks. Seahawks a helicopter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, sorry about that. Lapsus linguae. But the Sparrowhawks are really like very heavy, and the landing gear is way over engineered for what it is because again, it was made for traditional sea-based carriers, not airship carriers. But unfortunately, the Zeppelin USS Akron did not survive particularly long, and it was destroyed in April of 1933 in a thunderstorm off of the coast.
That's 2 for 2 with storms. It only lasted 2 years of service.
2 years of service, but it was doing a lot during those 2 years. But
we gotta
basically,
start inventing radar soon.
Yeah. So this is actually a really horrible accident. So this is the deadliest airship accident in history. Significantly more than the Hindenburg. There's about 100 people on board, and 35 are killed. So it's it's like a 60% survival rate when you look at it, which for a ship that literally fell out of the sky on fire I feel like is pretty good.
More than expected, right?
Yeah. But the Akron, there were 76 personnel on board. 73 perished, only 3 survivors.
Damn.
So that makes it the deadliest airship disaster in certainly United States history, if not all the time.
Those 3 guys that live, you got to play the lottery and count your blessings. You cheated death. That is absurd. Yeah.
So basically the airship was doing, I believe it was training exercises. So they were calibrating radio direction finders, and this was happening up in New Jersey, basically off the coast of Philadelphia, New Jersey area. So if you go west of Philadelphia and then south of New Jersey, that'll kind of put you where the airship crashed. So they're out of the Atlantic Ocean. It's April 1933, the 3rd of April 1933, and it's basically midnight, and there's heavy fog, there's bad weather. Unbeknownst to them, they were flying into basically one of the most violent storms to hit the North Atlantic in that time. And basically what happens is the rapid turbulence and the pressure changes are causing the gas bags to really have to work to keep itself stable. So basically they get shoved down by the air. And part of the problems with the Zeppelins, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Part of the problem with a Zeppelin is that you just have so much area for air pressure to push on, right? So if you look at an airplane, it's a relatively small compared to a Zeppelin.
Right.
It's pretty small, right? So obviously, if there's wind, it's going to affect you, but it's not going to affect you nearly as much as it will a Zeppelin, which is literally 3 football fields.
And it's not shearing anything. We've designed modern airplanes to be very aerodynamic, so when you get external forces like wind, it's shearing off of the leading edges of the aircraft on purpose. Yeah. This is a big old bubble.
It's a big old balloon, which means that if you blow on it, it's going to move, right? Yeah. And because it's so large, in order to be able to counteract those forces, you have to be able to put out an immense amount of power. And at the time, that just wasn't really possible. I don't even know if it would be possible today, to be honest with you, to be able to survive these kinds of storms. Whereas an airplane, yes, you definitely you don't want to be flying in a storm, but I think that you have a better chance than in the Zeppelin because the power, the forces that the storm is going to be exerting on the airplane relatively are small compared to the amount of force that the engines can put out, for example. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Surface area, I don't know much about engineering besides what you taught me. But in biology, surface area is very important for dissolving things, letting things travel across a natural barrier. I can't imagine if you're looking at we didn't have modern air modeling software back then, where you could actually put something into a wind tunnel without actually building it. Yeah. I would love to know what just leading wind at 40 knots looks like bouncing off the side of a Zeppelin compared to an aircraft. Because it has nowhere to go. It has to push and then spread across that surface. And you're getting all of that surface area is force that's being applied. Something to think about next time you're in an aircraft.
You know, a good way to say it that would sound very nice is basically like the surface area to power ratio.
Surface area to power ratio, but the power's the wind this time.
Well, but you know, this is the power that you can output, right? So the surface area to power ratio of a plane would be relatively high, right? Because you have a lot of power in a relatively small surface area. The surface area to power ratio of a Zeppelin would be relatively low because you have a huge surface area. And, you know, yes,
just some gas engines pushing it.
Eight 600 horsepower engines sounds like a lot, but I mean, if you look at the amount of power like a plane can put out, what's that? 8 times 600 is going to be, what, 4,800? I'm going to make a fool of myself.
This is why we got calculators.
No, but I feel bad. I think it is 4,800, right? So 8, we're going to just edit this out if I don't get it right. Yeah. 4,800 horsepower. Which, you know, I don't know how much, like, power, you know, a modern 747, for instance, puts out.
Way more.
The Boeing 747 has 4 engines, each of which can produce up to 60,000 horsepower.
Oh, okay. So we're talking 240,000 total horsepower across 4 engines.
The total horsepower of a Boeing 747 is almost 240,000 horsepower.
That's a lot. But it also is very heavy. So, like, you know, the difference is, yes, the airship is much bigger, significantly less weight.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know, actually, because the airship weighs, is what, 240,000 pounds dry?
Okay.
How much does a Boeing 47, how much does a...
Like, loaded,
735,000 pounds.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So it's a big one. So it is actually heavier, but it's, again, I think it really comes back to the surface area to power, right? So the surface area to power of a Zeppelin is, again, relatively low. You have a lot of surface area and not that much power, which means that pressure differential and wind is really going to be a problem, especially if it is not benign, right?
Right.
And also, so basically it just gets pushed up and down until they drop ballast to stabilize, but then it happens again. They have no more ballast to drop, and they're basically pushed into the ocean, and the lower fin basically strikes the sea, fills with water, and then just drags the stern down.
So this airship sinks like a naval ship at the end of the day.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so it crashes down in the ocean, and then it's not designed for stormy water, obviously, and it breaks up and it sinks. Because basically, once you break it, it's just a heap of metal. There's no flotation.
Nope.
You know, so it just breaks.
So those 3 sailors that survived, they had to survive the initial brunt of the crash and a sea rescue. Because that, like, anyone in the Navy can tell you, the sea don't give a fuck about you. It really doesn't care. It
really does not. And a big part of the reason so many people died is that there were no lifeboats on board and there were no personal flotation devices on board. Because
you said it took off at midnight, so like it's
well, that's
black.
when the crash happens.
Well, it crashed past midnight. It's dark.
It's like 12:15 of April 4th, right? They departed on April 3rd in the evening. There's actually a merchant vessel nearby, the German ship Phoebus, and they basically saw the lights descending toward the ocean at 12:23, and they alter to investigate, and then they thought they were witnessing a airplane crash. And basically at almost 1 o'clock in the morning, they pull the executive officer, Lieutenant Herbert V. Wiley, out of the water, and the ship's boat picks up 3 more men. But everybody else just basically drowned or died of hypothermia.
That's so sad. Because think about all that material on top of you. If you're on the underside of it, there's no way you're swimming out from under that big of a...
It's huge. It's a huge canopy. Yeah. But basically, one of the men they pull out later dies. after basically he was just in the cold water too long, and they weren't able to revive him. But the crew of the Phoebus basically is like just combing the ocean. The Navy sends out another blimp, J3, to go the search, which also crashes.
You're kidding me. No, it did not.
It does.
Tell me you're messing with me.
2 more men are killed.
No, so why would you send another airship? You just
Yep, that's what I was like. I was kind of bamboozled, but this is like goes back to we were in Boy Scouts, and like this goes back to the whole thing of like when you come across the scene of an accident, what is the first thing that you do?
Don't become the second victim.
Exactly.
This is the first rule of lifeguarding.
Do not become the second victim. Make sure the scene is safe. Exactly. So the Coast Guard like scrambles a bunch of stuff to help search for survivors. But again, like most people at this point, we're almost an hour past the crash. It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's cold. Yeah, it's April, but it's up north, so it's still
that temperature in the water is cold enough to take all the heat out of you.
Yeah, and basically the first American vessel on the scene, USS Tucker, arrives at 6 a.m. Any other survivors at that point would have had to survive 6 hours treading water in the frigid Atlantic.
It's unlikely. Your body's not.
It's just not going to happen.
Oh, man.
The Akron's loss really, again, kind of brings an end to the U.S. Navy's interest in airships. A big part of the reason for that is that the Rear Admiral William A. Moffett was killed in the crash.
No. Oh, so the guy that was leading the charge, there was no one to like...
There was nobody there to pick up the reins.
Because if he survived, he probably could make a logical argument on how we can make this not happen again, since he'd been so closely involved. But from a damage and like risk assessment, the Navy just cut ties with it.
Exactly. And they didn't immediately terminate like the programs. Like, so the USS Macon, which is the sister ship of the Akron, actually continues service until 1935. And they also
money on it.
They also received life jackets and boats and stuff like this. And when the USS Macon crashes in a storm...
You're kidding me.
Yeah. 3 years later, 70 of the 72 crew were saved because of the life jackets and because of the safety precautions that they took because of the crash of the Akron.
Hold up now, Jim. In just this one story about one ship, you have mentioned 3 separate other crashes, or 2 separate other crashes that are involved with storms and airships.
And I think that is really telling as to why the airship did not become the dominant mode of transportation. And obviously, like, this is the 1930s. Planes also have big problems with storms, and planes still have big problems with storms today. But the power to surface area ratio of an airplane is so much more favorable than that of a blimp or an airship that I think you have a lot better survivability in terms of inclement weather conditions. And you're a lot faster, so you can probably get out of the way of those weather systems if you can see them.
But even past that, just think about this hypothetical, right? Radar became popular in the 50s and 60s as we were fighting for air travel. That was one of the things we got out of satellites, right? Modern weather radar. If that radar, like weather radar, existed, we might still have airships today. Because those crashes would have been categorically avoidable if you could understand weather patterns the way we do now. So it begs the question, right? Is this something that might come back in a future, like, cyberpunk time? Or is it too antiquated?
Maybe. I mean, we do have, like, modern blimps and stuff, right?
We got, like, 4.
Yeah. But I think... That's true. Yeah, that's true. But I think the problem with it is that it's like the technological gap, right? Actually, okay, so hear me out, right? I think there might be an interesting case for it. If you look at like electrical air propulsion, and actually I think there's somebody working on this.
So Jim, are you asking me to help you make the first diesel electric modern airship? Because I will.
There is a company that is making these. They're called Flying Whales.
Well named. Even if they're not like manned, you know what I mean?
Again, it all depends on like what you're trying to do. Because the thing about planes is they're going to be faster. They're always going to be faster than airships. But I think like if you look at in terms of like energy expenditure, right? Again, 747, 700,000 pounds. 240,000 horsepower. It's going to consume a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
Right? Just to stay aloft, it's got to consume an enormous amount of fuel. Whereas if you look at like an airship, yes, it's slower, but
so are ships.
You have to,
like cargo ships.
If you're looking at cargo, like you don't have to spend nearly as much fuel just to stay airborne.
It's interesting that buoyancy is the common denominator in these modes of transport that makes it cheap. If you can use physics in your advantage, you can actually save a lot of money. And like this, you're showing me this flying well picture. I'll put it up for the YouTube now.
You save a lot of energy.
Doesn't it look good? I know it's just a like concept art, but it looks so good.
It does. It does. Look
Imagine that scaled down to like 2 container size, and it's a drone.
Yeah. And so this airship that they're talking about, Flying Whales, is able to transport about 60 tons of cargo. So 2 to 3 freight trucks, which is not a huge amount. That would be really sick seeing
across the like domestic United States. Like we learn our lesson, we don't put it over water, but that would be.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know,
I'm reading I'm kind of like skimming the article. One of the things they're talking about is like carrying really heavy, bulky items like wind turbine blades that can't because like if you've seen like the semi trucks that like transport turbine blades,
it's ridiculous.
They're super long. Yeah, like they're crazy, crazy long. There's actually one.
Have you seen those aircraft that carry other aircraft parts, like the Airbus Beluga, as an example?
Yeah,
Boeing has a fat version of a 747 that's like double decker, so you can put a fuselage in it. That would be a really cool use case from like manufacturing site to manufacturing site.
That would be pretty neat. There are some problems with it, but we'll get into that maybe at a later date. I'd love to talk about flying. Maybe we could get Flying Whales guy on our podcast.
I do want to talk to you just briefly about some. We've been every now and then I'll send Jim some links. Airship related. I saw the coolest functional use of EVs I've ever seen. Through the guys at Edison Motors up in Canada, our neighbors up our very violent hat up north Canada. A bunch of truckers in the logging industry made a diesel electric EV, and they dropped a video about 10 months ago where they were able to pull like a Sherman tank with, they didn't have the full Sherman tank, so they put one of your F1, like your Ford trucks on top, full metal, just to show, hey, this thing can pull 100,000 pounds. And it did it effortlessly. They call themselves Edison, and their tagline is literally like stealing ideas from Tesla. And I just love them so much. And I really hope that they succeed because the truck looks awesome. The little prototype they put together.
Edison Motors is a really cool company, and they do a really good job with their social media. Like I see their shorts and stuff all the time.
Oh
maybe that's just because I'm a nerd.
We have the same YouTube algorithm, I think, because it finally
they're really
hit me.
well put together.
Hey,
they're really cool.
I might send an email to the Edison Motors guy and ask if he has time just to do a quick interview, because that's a technology I really believe in. It was good enough for trains all through the 30s and 40s. Diesel electric has been proven. Yeah. That might be the solution. Like instead of having a full EV like Tesla, to get more of the like folks that are a little bit hesitant about it, got plenty of diesel. A diesel electric generator or a diesel generator in pretty much with the point of charging batteries, that's very viable. And it's technology we have already. That might be the intermediate.
Yeah, that would work really well, because I think part of it too is like it doesn't put additional stress on like the power grid.
Exactly. You're generating your power internally with diesel. And diesel,
but you have the option to charge your batteries with any other supply if you want.
Exactly.
Right?
And then
so it gives you a lot of flexibility.
It gives you time to harden the power grid, actually I'd be real with you. I think the future of America, like if we get back on track where we stop fighting each other and we start fighting problems again, we harden this power grid and get back into nuclear energy. This is the most safe nuclear energy has ever been in history. Folks think about Chernobyl, they think about 5 Mile Island or Fukushima, and they think, oh, nuclear's bad, it's going to destroy. No, all of these disasters did not go without huge amounts of R&D after the fact. There has never been a better time for nuclear power in our society. You could bomb a nuclear power plant and the thing's going to scram automatically nowadays, This is very doable, and I want to talk. If we're going to have this podcast, it's going to be an engineering podcast. I feel like I would love to use it as an excuse for me to get to talk to these really smart people like Jim, who are doing these incredible one-off things with like mom and pop style, like just folks building in a garage. And I know we're not the platform that's going to get them there. I just want to hear what they have to say. Like, talk to the next generation, right?
We got to put together our expeditionary package so we can send it.
I got a feeling the Edison guys got their own stuff at this point. They're on YouTube all the time. You know, I'm sure we could. Let's email them and see. Worst they can say is no, right?
That's true.
Because there's a couple other companies I'm not going to name right now. I would really love to, and there's some of them I don't agree with. I'd love to hear what they have to say.
I'm excited, Derek. The future is bright.
The future is bright. I think we have an opportunity here to, I mean, I know I said just a few episodes ago I can never be a teacher, but if the audience can learn with me, you know, I feel like I'm doing my part.
I think that's actually a really interesting point, right? Is like sometimes the point is not to be a teacher, the point is to be the student.
I'm here to learn. Like, you'd be surprised how much I've learned just from, you know, years of conversation with you offline. But now actually I listen to our episodes several times, and I try to make sure, at least for the YouTube version, you know, if there's something we say that's wrong, I try to make sure we put it in corrections. Like,
one of the wisest things that we can do is to always approach something in the mind of a student, where we're open to learning, we're open to new ideas. Not necessarily that we're just going to immediately accept them.
Yeah, when you stop learning, you stop trying.
Exactly. When you stop learning, you stop progressing. So I think it's very important to always approach things as much as you can with the attitude of, what is there to learn here? How can I get better?
And here's the thing. You pay for a degree, but in this modern day, you don't have to pay for an education if that's what you're seeking. You have to pay for the paper, don't get me wrong. But if you want education, half of what we do on Everything's a Spring is Wikipedia. Sometimes it's very specific, like we've done some stuff out of the FBI vault, some very specific like Heritage Foundation stuff for that specific airship or craft or whatever. But, or like NASA, you know, they don't mind you using your stuff as long as you're not making money off of it. So join us, folks. And as we approach episode 20, it comes to an end.
It's all public knowledge.
Like, we have to make sure that we protect knowledge for the next generation, whether you're having kids or not is notwithstanding. Because, as you see in several parts of the world right now, folks are trying to fight education as a concept. And you don't win wars without education. You don't make doctors without education. You don't make engineers without education. So even if it's not your thing, support education around you. Support your local libraries. I'm telling you, it will make a difference. We have to fight for the things we want. We have to.
That's very true. That's true. All right, Derek. I think I know we've got some time constraints today, so I think that's all we have time for. This has been another episode of Everything's a Spring. Thank you so much for joining us. Derek, we have anything to plug?
We are brought to you in part solely by Jim and Derek Foundation. If you'd like to support the show, I'm telling you, we will start reading your comments when y'all start commenting. I would love to have a little bit more, you know, call and answer. Spotify specifically has done a lot to close the gap between creators and their viewers. So engage with some of the new features on Spotify, or if you're using something like Podly or I don't know what our folks from other countries are using, they pop up like Cast FM and such. Send us a comment on YouTube. We have an email, everythingsaspring@gmail.com. Engage with us. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, let's bounce.
Let's bounce.